But you probably, I won't spend the time with you, you probably know the Willie Sutton joke, the bank robber. You know, where do you think the money is? In NSF, or in health, or in defense? But there's some bad news about defense, however. This is what you get in the other agencies with basic and applied research, which is what interests you. This is what you get in defense. Now, some of this is understandable. You know, we are fighting two wars. We are trying to work out how to stop roadside bombs. We do want landing gear to work right the first time, every time. So there's a lot of testing and experimentation, which is a necessary part of it. You know, nobody wants to be in an experimental submarine. But but we are spending, arguably, when we're talking about research and early stage development, we're spending a lot less than the international figures suggest. So I would suggest that not only do you have the surge in Asian applied research, but we're spending less in the future than we think we are. And I think that's a cause for concern. And by the way, this concern is shared by upper levels. But there's not just, I want to just point out here, I'm going to do a quick tour, and I apologize, I'm going to try and do this quickly, of some of the other economies around the world, and also some of the states here in the US. Brazil is really on the move. I was in the Treasury when we used to laugh about national investments. You know, the Europeans had a plan, which was really quite laughable, and we did laugh at Treasury. They wanted to build airplanes by having part done in Spain, part done in Germany, part done in France, if you could imagine, and assembled in Toulouse. And it was the most ridiculous idea. They'd never been able to build an airplane, so they thought they could build an airplane as a coalition. We were pretty confident they couldn't. It's called Airbus. So it actually has been a little more successful. Embraer was a misguided effort of the Brazilian government to build aircraft. And anytime you guys want to fly an Embraer, you just have to go out to the airport today, and there are several airlines that'll put you in one. My point is that they've had success in promoting enterprises, but they're investing all across the supply chain. And interestingly, although they're making very substantial progress in scientific articles and in R&D expenditure, FINAP, which is similar to the Advanced Technology Program in providing funds, NIST's Advanced Technology Program, now called the TI Technology Innovation Program. Now called the Technology Innovation Program, is just a small fraction of what the Brazilians are spending in the same space. Some people say, well, Brazil and China are really big countries. The focus is apparent in Singapore. In fact, you guys here, honestly, Freddie, you remind me of Singapore. The quality of the infrastructure, the focus of the leadership, thank you very much, I appreciate that, is very Singaporean in its nature. They have two major parks there. They're attracting world-class scholars from all over the world. Perhaps one of their main problems is generating local entrepreneurs. Something that gave me hope, and I don't mean to be too critical, I have great respect for them, but something that gave me hope, I was down there and we sat at a big round table, and you know, it was almost like a doctoral exam. The state secretary kept asking question after question, while ever stranger objects appeared on my plate that I was supposed to wrestle with chopsticks. But nobody else asked any questions. And I would suggest that the less hierarchical approach that we bring here and the more informality is a remaining strength. I also spoke with a defector who quietly said he'd like to talk with me at my hotel. And he argued that they have a real problem there, because if you're very good, you go into the civil service if you succeed your exams. If you don't do as well as some, you join a merchant bank or an investment bank. although there are not many of the latter. The idea that your family has sacrificed, you studied for years so that you would not go into one of the formal institutions, but actually go on and off and try and start your own company is completely foreign. And that's a challenge. On the other hand, they may well import entrepreneurs as well. But my broader point here is the focus, the commitment, and the willingness to spend of a country of 4.5 million people located in a not always stable part of the world, where they have brought their income amazingly from $350 a year in 1962 to $35,000 today. How did they do that? They worked at it. They invested. They saved. They actually collect taxes, hard as it might be, and then they reinvest it. Our more traditional competitors are also reforming. Japan has made a lot of input efforts. They've copied things like Sematech through Salit, but as we were discussing earlier today, that doesn't mean that it necessarily works. But Finland, Sweden, France are doing a lot of really interesting things. One of the ways they mobilize private capital is they provide tax credits. I describe them here as tax grants because we tend to use tax credits if you have revenues. They tend to figure out, well, if you did have revenues, you would have had this much money, so we'll give that money to you. Not to be confused with a regular grant, of course, but unless you're a financial analyst. The point is, they give away a lot of money under tax rubrics because that's what the Commission lets them do. Germany's an interesting case. You know, you have a lot of people in the US that say, well, you know, manufacturing doesn't matter so much and we can't compete with the Chinese because they're a low-wage economy. And these poor dumb Germans just don't seem to understand that. They keep exporting to China. They keep manufacturing quality products and selling them all over the world. Germany is a high-wage country. Germany is a high-regulation country. Germany is an extremely environmentally conscious country. But it's also a country which is very keenly focused on energy, transportation. When I visited the regional government in Munich, one of the guys leaned over and with real passion, the state secretary said, "Let me be very clear. You may think automobiles are commodity products that don't matter. We don't agree with that. And we're not leaving this industry. And we are going to work on nanotechnology. Nanotechnology for paint, nanotechnology for windscreens, nanotechnology for engine blocks. And we're going to export automobiles from Germany to Asia and to the United States from now until the end of time." I mean, is that clear? You know, whereas we have a debate in Washington about whether or not the money that we loaned to General Motors that we're now getting back entirely was a good idea. Imagine that debate. Is it a good idea to have saved 2 million jobs? To have saved the heart of your manufacturing industry? Where Ford Motor, who didn't need the bailout, understood that GM and Chrysler had to be bailed out or the entire supply chain would collapse. You know, we sometimes have a hard time in getting what I would argue are fairly basic things understood. Why does manufacturing matter? Do any of you have any doubts about this? Actually, am I preaching to the choir here or preaching to skeptics? Who agrees that manufacturing matters? All right. And I see some of our Asian students don't like to raise their hands, but probably don't think. How many of you think manufacturing really doesn't matter?
It's relative.
Relative, right. Yeah, well, one of the things, as an internationalist, one of the things that always troubles me is our orthodox economists often seem to be arguing that the rest of the world somehow misunderstands everything. That the French are really not good at math and the Chinese are very short-sighted. But strangely enough, other countries seem to think it matters a lot, and they work very hard at keeping their manufacturing capacity. It's a source of employment. I mean, this is empirical. The R&D that is done by U.S. manufacturers in very large part. We have to have something over time. It would be great if some of the containers that leave the United States were filled with something other than cardboard. And as one of our defense officials remarked the other day, how do you defend yourself if you can't make things? And I'm not talking about the berets, but I'm talking about the weapon systems. And you hear people talk grandly about, oh, these are just, we don't need to worry about the legacy systems. Legacy systems, it's such an interesting term. Are you talking about the banking system? Are you talking about the air traffic control system? Are you talking about every weapon system we have, which are often several generations behind in chip technologies? This is what we do. Now, some argue that we should just work out an agreement that if we ever have a violent problem with our Chinese friends, that they would sign sort of like a prenuptial, that we'll get 6 months supply of chips in case we have a problem. But I'm not sure that that would be honored in any case. The Germans are exporting around the world, and one of the reasons that we think they're good at this is because of the Fraunhofer Institutes, which are remarkable efforts to try and maintain German manufacturing excellence. But you know, the Germans also understand the standards game. They're working very closely with the Chinese on designs for kitchen appliances. And strangely enough, the designs they recommend are the size the Germans make. Ours are larger and won't fit into the standard kitchens if they use those standards. So it's doesn't mean we couldn't retool, but it's worth thinking about. So what are we doing here in the U.S.? Well, we have some very interesting things in Michigan. I'm just going to skip through this, but basically what Michigan is doing out of desperation is trying to emulate what the rest of the world is doing in terms of subsidies, tax abatements, training, assistance in building out. And in batteries, we've had some remarkable progress. There's some 16 battery-related factories, some of them foreign factories, of course. And be careful of this word, but I've been out to visit A123, which is one of the batteries companies, and it's very encouraging. And I think the Chevy Volt, I don't know what your opinions are, but the Chevy Volt seems very encouraging too. We probably just need to drive a little harder on demand. We're organizing a conference in April, and I think there may be some lessons in this conference for what you're doing here. What they have done with the Ohio Capital Fund, with Ohio Third Frontier, they have passed mandates, and there's very extensive use of foundations to help generate investments in the next generation of wealth. The foundations are an area that I'm not sure has been fully exploited in this region, which I think you might want to think about.
So what do you mean by foundations?
Things like the Heinz endowments, or things like the Gunn Foundation in northeastern Ohio. These are foundations which are making investments in educational infrastructure. Sometimes they don't, as one person from the Heinz endowment said, that what we're trying to do is fill in the cracks between the federal and the state and the local funding and what needs to be done. The foundations can be quick, they can be effective. I think they're best when they act as fund of funds, where they're supporting an institution which is then making investments. One of the things that we found with federal money is that there's an enormous, disproportionate catalytic effect. Small amounts of federal money can attract funds from other areas, and I think this, at the state level, this facility certainly reflects that. I think I'll skip this. These are some of the things that you may be able to benefit from here in New York. President Obama is clearly the first president who has focused on national competitiveness and innovation as a positive sum approach to that. The stimulus funds, an $18 billion up is very helped. This commitment to doubling the R&D budget. He has made the R&D tax credit permanent. Now there's pressure to make it a larger tax credit, which may be a good thing.